Hello everyone, I'm Captain Logan, and hey, guess what? It's not Spawn Year! It's day 22 of my comic review video day calendar, and today I'm reviewing only the second issue that I procured after I started recording this show, because it was sent to me in the mail by Austin, the Day Ghost. Austin, who you might know from shows such as The Request, and many marathons, and many commentaries, and other things. And it was super cool of him to send me this. Thanks a bunch, Austin. Although I immediately knew what I was getting myself into as soon as he told me he was sending me something, because he goes, "Hey, Cap, I'm sending you something in the mail." And I said, "It's Man-Thing, right?" And he said, "Maybe." And I'm like, "It's Man-Thing." And he goes, "Yeah, it's Man-Thing." Austin is an obsessed Man-Thing reader and collector, and the only person like that I know. I'm sure there's one other person on the planet that I've never met before that is as obsessed with Man-Thing as Austin is. And at one time, I thought it was just an ironic thing, and no, Austin loves Man-Thing. He wants to get a tattoo, just one, and when he does, it will be Man-Thing, and he has now read everything with Man-Thing, and I think at one time he had the same thing that I did with some characters like Cassandra Cain and Silver Surfer, things I've talked about here on the show already, where he really liked Man-Thing but hadn't read everything, and he just remedied that not too long ago. And so now he's also kind of a Man-Thing expert. He really knows his stuff. And he sent me a classic issue of Man-Thing, and an original copy. This is a really great looking first printing. This is Adventure into Fear with the Man-Thing from 2012, and I got a really nice looking copy here. Not too shabby on the colors and not too faded, and I was kind of excited to get this, so thanks a lot, Austin. I, by contrast, have rarely read anything with Man-Thing in it. I have the R.L. Stine miniseries from the mid-2010s, or at least the first couple issues of it. I may have stopped buying that. I honestly can't remember. I think I at least didn't read all of it, because it was nonsensical and bizarre and structurally really weird, and I didn't know what I was looking at, and I knew it was going to be odd with R.L. Stine, and I didn't expect, great storytelling or anything, but this was like latter career Neil Adams. Rest in peace, Neil Adams. But that's what it read like, and I couldn't, shed any light on it. I couldn't make heads or tails of it. But Austin and I are going to review that together at some point. I'm going to give it a second look. And so I'm not going to review an issue of that on the show. So this is the only chance for Man-Thing on Not Spawn Year, and I'll do my best with it. So Adventure into Fear with Man-Thing, with the Man-Thing, not starring Man-Thing. I have a couple theories as to why that might be, that it just says with. I didn't look into this, but I'm sure Adventure into Fear is a horror anthology thing that starts before Man-Thing comes into it. And even still, some of those things I think still would get like a starring moniker. It might be because there are backup features in this book, and I'm not going to review the backup feature, I'm just going to talk about the Man-Thing story. And it might also be because Man-Thing is arguably not a character, or is he? That's what's interesting about Man-Thing. It's not just, is he more monster than man? It's, is he a thing and not even a sentient being? The idea when he was created at his inception with Gerber and Stan Lee was supposed to be what if you had a character that loses his sentience in the first place and still has the remnants of a man? So it's the classic monster thing, but going even farther than a Hulk or a thing. It's Man-Thing. He used to be a man, or the remnants of a man that used to still be alive is inside of him, and there's this kind of constant battle and this constant philosophical this kind of existential question as to whether there's a soul in there, and it's even more man versus animal than something like Wolverine, where there indisputably Wolverine is a sentient creature. Logan is in there, and sometimes the animal takes over and suppresses Logan to some degree. Here it's even more than the reverse of that. It's that there's this thing that has the remnants of a man who is fueled completely by emotion and sort of instinct, but even more emotion than that. And so sometimes when he's responding to things, his emotions start to look like reasoning, start to look like thought and rationality. But he's really just reacting, just responding to everything around him. But because he gets angry when, or I should say, it gets angry when injustices are done, there's an argument to be made that the man is still in there, or that there's still a soul there. So he's a really interesting kind of character study in taking the shambles of a person and the and what's essentially, again, not even an animal, but just a lumbering figure, and asking the what makes a man question based on what is still left. And that's what I find really interesting about Man-Thing, and finally reading a little bit of this. And that's as much as I ever really understood about it. Just especially in talking to Austin, I've come to understand that Salus is not Man-Thing, but Man-Thing has the what used to be Salus within him. And that's about what I understood about it. And so, anyway, we'll go ahead and get into this particular issue and what this is about. Let me say actually real quick too. I did a tiny bit of reading on this, and I always assumed that Man-Thing was a ripoff of Swamp Thing, and they come to being almost simultaneously. It's kind of fascinating, and there's kind of a dispute between the creators as to whether one was ripped off of the other one, or if they both kind of came into being at the same time, just something was in the air. Swamp Thing does post-date Man-Thing by a year and a half, and Marvel considered suing DC over it, and ultimately chose not to. So I was really surprised to learn that Swamp Thing actually does come after Man-Thing, and that this idea came first. But I guess the deal is the characters diverged enough after their initial inception that Marvel didn't feel the need to go after DC after that. But there are obviously lots of similarities between Man-Thing and Swamp Thing, and not just in the names. But Swamp Thing is, I believe, and I'm not super familiar with him either, I read Swamp Thing and I hear the green and my eyes just glaze over. But I think Swamp Thing actually is still more or less the scientist is there and just stuck in the body of a monster. And here it's the opposite. It's not a monster stuck in the body of a scientist. I guess that would be the Hulk, but it's a monster with arguably the soul of a scientist inside of him. Anyway, I'm 8 minutes in and I haven't even talked about this issue yet, so let's go ahead and get into this. So, no choice of colors. This is an uncomfortable one to some degree to talk about, and I'm sure that's why Austin sent it, because he wanted to watch me quake in my boots while I had to talk about this. This is early 70s Marvel, and they do this quite a bit in some different books, tackling issues of racism and bigotry. And I mean, I say they do this a lot in the early 70s. They do this throughout, starting with in the early 60s with Stan Lee's Marvel. That's what the X-Men is. It's a metaphor for racism and for bigotry, and asking the question of whether people that look different and come from different backgrounds can ever find a way to peacefully coexist. And this is dealing with more specific, right in the moment, issues of racism kind of happening right then, not based on any particular historical event, I don't think, but racial tension very much in the air right after the Civil Rights Movement. That's where we are here in 1972, just a few years after that happens. And so anyway, the idea is Man-Thing, and I assume most issues are probably Man-Thing lumbering around and happening upon some kind of horrible injustice or something. And here it's a white cop chasing after a black man. I'm going to talk a lot about the color of these guys' skin, because that's what the issue is about. No choice of colors. Part of me almost wanted this to be in black and white, just because that idea of color and of black versus white in the races, but also in that at first glance we're supposed to see the situation and think there are clear-cut good guys and bad guys, and by the end it is not as clear-cut, and there are shades of gray, and it made me think this would read really great in black and white, but the coloring is really good, and it provides some atmosphere, so I'm certainly not calling foul on that choice. But once I got to the end and I realized what the point of the issue was, I was like, oh, this would be really good in black and white. Anyway, so the idea is there is a black man that's being chased by a white cop who's been after him for a while, and apparently the black man has escaped from prison. And the cop is constantly yelling about how he's broken the law and doesn't care about the law, and you find out very quickly that it's, for this guy, not just about chasing down a who he claims is a murderer, but it's because of the color of his skin more than it is anything. He doesn't like black people, and he gets very, very racist and white supremacist-esque, and he says some really awful, horrible things, and goes right up to wanting genocide by the end of the issue. And so Man-Thing, again, who is not able to reason like a regular person, hears the things this cop is saying and sees how horrible of a day this black man is having, and decides that he is going to get, or that Man-Thing is going to get involved in all of this. And again, totally by instinct. And so the man that the supposed victim that the cop is chasing ends up being rescued by Man-Thing and freaks out by his appearance, and then says, hey, we have something in common. People probably hate you because you don't look like them, and I'm having the same problem, and people are treating me like I'm a monster. And we'll find out later that it's not just because of the color of his skin, but actually because of something he really did. It's not as clear-cut as it initially seems like. So it is about bigotry and about how easy it is for people to decide that their kind is superior to another kind, but there is more going on to it than that. And so he gives us his version of events where he'll conveniently leave some things out, which is interesting because he looks at Man-Thing and says, hey, you can't hear what I'm saying, probably because you don't have ears, and oh, you don't even have a mouth. And that's why it drives Austin crazy when in extra media Man-Thing growls, because he doesn't have a mouth, so he shouldn't be making any sound at all. And he says, oh, well, I'm going to tell you my whole backstory anyway. I guess, I've got a captive audience, and I don't even care if he can hear me or not. Now, Man-Thing must be able to hear or put together what people are saying in some way, because he can perceive injustices, and there are places in this where the only way he would know that something unfair was happening to someone else would be because he understood what they were saying. And there's a place toward the end of this where I'm like, if only characters were smart enough in comics to not talk to themselves, fewer bad things would happen to them. But anyway, he gives us our version of events, and we find out that he grew up in a tiny tenement, and his family had almost nothing, and his mother worked, but his father couldn't find a job. And the local police tried to, according to him, keep them down because they were African American, and make sure that this guy couldn't really get work and wasn't really out in public and seen very much. And so he, from a very early age, blames the authority, doesn't trust authority, and maybe doesn't even like generally white people because of that. Although he does get enamored with a white woman, so maybe not, but certainly doesn't like the authority, and fair enough, right? And so he becomes enamored with this girl who he starts to talk to, and I don't know if they full-on are able to date or not, but they're at least friends. And then the cop that we've been seeing that's after this guy is upset because he also likes this girl and is enraged because this black man is after her. So it's a very dangerous kind of love triangle. And he ends up sending his, according to this guy anyway, sending his deputy after this guy, and he's and I forget this guy's name, but the black man, Corley is the name of the cop. The black man is has done nothing wrong at this point, and apparently, and this guy is Corley is abusing his authority and sends his deputy after him, and that's where he basically leaves the story. So he's trying to hide, and there's something at the beginning. I was a little bit confused about this. There's something at the beginning about this guy being a escaped convict, and that's why I was kind of hesitating for a second, because I'm not seeing anywhere in his story where he goes to jail, or maybe I'm just forgetting something. But yeah, a trumped-up burglary charge, he said. So he hasn't done anything wrong, but Corley is making up a burglary charge, and I don't see him in jail at any point. He's just being chased after by this deputy. Anyway, long story short, we get the cops' version of events later, or at least filling in the extra stuff that we didn't get earlier, and we're told that by the cop that this guy, I wish I knew his name, because I don't want to just keep calling him the black guy. What is his name? I'm not sure if we ever even get it now that I'm looking at it. Oh, and they're in a place called Topeka, which is not the capital of Kansas. Topeka. Anyway, so by the end, we find out that this guy did indeed kill the deputy, and he shot the deputy, but he didn't kill the sheriff. He did not kill the sheriff, but he did shoot the deputy, and so again, that makes it not quite as cut and dry. And Man-Thing has this point of hesitation where it's like, what do I do? There is this guy who's going to be killed, and he befriended me, but he lied to me, and he didn't tell me everything. And again, even though Man-Thing isn't really a man, he is able to, he has feelings about this, and he has a kind of inherent morality all his own, or all its own, and Man-Thing ends up not getting involved anymore at all. He just walks away, and whatever is going to happen is going to happen. And so this Corley guy, the sheriff, is throwing all these racial slurs out and belittling him, calling him boy, like you see so often with like white supremacists or white people who think they're better than black people, and keeps being condescending and all of that. He says he's a murderer, but we find out that, okay, he actually really is. He really did kill that deputy, and his only reason is he was, like, he doesn't even say self-defense. The deputy was coming after him, but was threatening him. And if he was holding his gun on him, then I might understand it, but we honestly don't really know what the situation was exactly, and I don't think we're supposed to, at this point, 100% side with the African-American guy. I don't know if we ever get his name, but it certainly never makes Corley sympathetic at all. He's an absolute terrible person. He's a straight-up monster. But I think this is supposed to speak to human condition, where when your back is against the wall and enough pressure is put on you, it's very easy for you to start to take on some of the undesirable attributes, some of the bad character traits of the person who is doing you wrong. And so he responds in the wrong way and kills that deputy. And I'm sympathetic to him for why he did that, but I'm certainly not condoning it. And so I understand why Swamp Thing feels the way he does, or Swamp Thing, why Man Thing, pardon me, feels the way he/it does. And he just walks away, and Corley ends up tragically killing this man. And then he makes the mistake of talking to himself. And he says, oh, it's Jackson. Pardon me, Jackson was the guy's name. Jackson, now that you're dead, I almost wish you was alive to see the big old smile on my face. I wish I could take this here gun and aim and kill off all your kind with one shot. So now he's crying for genocide. And that sets off Man Thing. And Man Thing comes up to him and wants to rip him apart. And then Man Thing gets this wonderful out because he intimidates the cop, freaks him out, and Corley becomes afraid. And as we all know, if you've ever looked at anything with Man Thing, whatever knows fear burns the Man Thing's touch. And I love that we don't get the catchphrase until the very last page of the issue. And he becomes a charred corpse because Man Thing, at the end of the day, is a inhuman thing, and he kills him just because he is afraid. But, and that's just what he does. It's just instinct. But did he kind of deserve it, or was he sort of asking for it? Like, there's a catharsis here. I don't wish this on anybody, and yet look at the ideas he was perpetuating right before this happens. And so there's a part of me that can't help but go, Joker from 1989, I'm glad you're dead. And so I really appreciate the kind of ethical conundrum that Man Thing has here, and that it's not easy. It's not just black and white. Now this cop is over the top. Besides the fact that he wants this girl and can't have her, I don't really know how he got this way and why he is so racist. Like, it's to the nines with that, and I'm sure it's a cultural thing. I'm sure he was, or perhaps, I can't say I'm sure, perhaps he was raised that way. It might be it might be a thing that's real prevalent and popular, around this town. It might be systemic, I guess is the word I was looking for, but it certainly, but I certainly would like to know a little bit more so that he's not just a one-dimensional crazy cartoon character. Jackson is a lot more well developed, I think, and more three-dimensional, and he is a flawed guy who understandably loses himself in the moment, and you can't help but sympathize with him even though he does the wrong thing. But what I like most about this comic is the way it introduces this character if you've never looked at Man Thing before. And this is real early, so there's only been a few of these so far, and it is a really good... It does give you a really good definition of who this character is, and it's a good snapshot into the standard kind of storytelling for this character. So everything this guy is, this character is about, is perfectly encapsulated here front to back. So if this was the only Man Thing that you looked at, you'd have a pretty good understanding of what that character is, even without it feeling the need to give you too much about his backstory. There's not a great deal of recapping that happens here. It's a really good just like 16-page story, and because there's a backup feature, it's not any longer than that. It's just 16 pages, and it gives you just what you need to appreciate that character. So anyway, that is Adventure into Fear with the Man Thing. So yeah, not not the most uplifting comic that I've read so far and reviewed so far this year, and an uncomfortable and controversial subject matter, but an important one that certainly should be discussed and doesn't read too, PSA-esque. We've been talking a lot about PSAs this year. It does feel like a real story. It's a little over the top with how just completely uncertifiably insane and evil the cop is in this, but beyond that, I think it handles the material pretty well. It reminds me, at the risk of going back to McFarlane again, it reminds me a little bit of the KKK issue of Spawn that happens a little bit after issue 29. So with the abusive father, that issue, because there's a period where McFarlane takes Spawn on kind of a road trip, and he deals with a lot of different sorts of characters and a lot of separate, hard-hitting, heavy subject matters, and I think this handles that even quite a bit more maturely than McFarlane does. Which maybe not too hard, but in that McFarlane issue isn't terrible. But anyway, I really appreciated this. So thanks a lot for sending me that, Austin. And I will see you again tomorrow with another one, folks. Thanks a lot for watching, and happy reading.